What's up, guys? It's Masked Up Swede. Right now, I'm checking out another documentary type of video. This one is the most dangerous gangs in the world. So yeah, man. The channel is called The Fugitive. So go subscribe and go like the video, man. And yeah, let's see what gangs is gonna be on there, man. And let me know as well if you wanna see more like documentary type of reactions, man. Because I always think this type of stuff is interesting to see, to be honest, man. I do not condone it, but I think it's interesting to see how stuff like this works, man. So yeah, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. We're on the way to 1,000 subs, man. Let's go.
Love gangs. Well, maybe
Like, I can imagine, I don't know if they're gonna count like the mob and that type of stuff as like gangs. But yeah, or maybe the cartel and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll see, man.
not love, but we are certainly fascinated by them. There have been so many books, movies, TV shows, and songs about gangs and gang life, and honestly, it's easy to see why. Gangs look very cool from the outside, but make no mistake, they are very
I don't know about cool, but I mean, money always makes people like interested. I mean, that's probably the main thing. In some parts, it's probably just like feeling part of a group as well.
very dangerous and have been responsible for some pretty heinous crimes over the years. But which are the most dangerous gangs in the world? Keep watching to find out. The Albanian Mafia. When you
Yeah, I was thinking some mafias is gonna be on here.
think of countries with mafias, the Balkan country of Albania is probably not one of them, but you'd be surprised to hear that Albania has
I would think of that, to be honest. Maybe not as like the main, you always think about like the Italian mob, but yeah.
several mafias, several dangerous ones. There are 15 major crime families in Albania, and their influence stretches far and wide. In Germany alone, there are about 40 Albanian gangs operating, and governments are worried about how powerful they're becoming. There's also a growing presence of these Albanian gangs in the UK, Spain, France, and Greece. One thing about the Albanian mafia, they sure know how to network. According to reports, the mafia has been tied to other mafias in Greece, Bulgaria, Turkey, Romania, and Italy, and they're not done. The mafia has been extending its ties to other countries like Australia and China. That's a lot of mafia connections being exchanged. And what does the Albanian mafia do with all of its influence? In a nutshell, trafficking. The Albanian mafia has been known to traffic drugs, people, weapons, counterfeit goods, and pretty much anything that can be trafficked. But let's
That sounds like basically what all gangs try to do, man.
focus on their main export, drugs. Now, the Albania mafia used to help the Turkish mafia smuggle their drugs back in the 90s, but after more Albanians began moving to Western Europe, they decided to strike out and create their own operations. Now, the Albanian mafia is so powerful and brings in so much money to the country that Albania is the only country in Europe that's considered a narco state, basically a country that relies
I didn't know that. I didn't know you would call Albania a narco state.
Albania is the only country in Europe that's considered a narco state, basically a country that relies heavily on the drug trade. Yikes.
Albanian gangs are the dominant force in organised crime across the UK. We've been told that Albanian crime groups are shipping hundreds of millions of pounds in criminal proceeds back to Albania every year.
Now, as you can imagine, keeping a drug and trafficking operation this big going steady might involve getting your hands dirty sometimes. Take the death of Troy Kellett, a shipping tycoon from Australia who died under very odd circumstances. Kellett is believed to have had ties to the Albanian mafia when he was alive, and just a few hours before his death, he had sold his business for $10 million. Then, on July 9th, 2023, he was riding on some containers and he fell and died. But family members say that he'd been acting strange before he died, and considering the mafia connection and the money, something might be amiss. Surenos.
Sureños. That's like a Mexican gang, I think.
The interesting thing about the Surenos, otherwise known as Southern United Radza or Sur 13, is that they operate both in and out of the prison system. Now, what we know as the Surenos today was born out of a prison rivalry between Mexican-American gangs in the mid-20th century. In the California prison system, there were those from the south and north of California. And
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of like prison documentaries like back in the day, but like years ago. That there seems to be like a lot of gangs, man. And they kind of separate by like where you're from as well, which I guess they do in most prisons in the US as well.
Let me tell you, they all hated each other. The Southerners thought the Northerners were too country, and the Northerners thought they were too American. Put a bunch of gang members who hate each other in prison, and someone is bound to die. After one Southerner killed another in prison over shoes, two groups formed, the Norteños, who are Mexican-American
Oh yes, Sureños and the Norteños. Okay.
gang members from Northern California and the Sureños from the South. Sureños are known for sporting the color blue and for tattooing the word on their body. When they're not showing solidarity through dress, they're engaging in the usual gang activities like drug trafficking, extortion, and murder. Take Gustavo Perez Arriaga, a member of the gang who was arrested in 2018 for murdering a policeman after being pulled over and starting a manhunt.
And this just in, our first look at Arriaga's mugshot. According to the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department, authorities have also found the likely murder weapon.
While
So he shot a police for stopping him, basically. That's crazy, man. R.I.P.
County Sheriff's Department, authorities have also found the likely murder weapon.
While the group is based primarily in Southern California, its members are spread in around 35 U.S. states. Its main leadership is in the California prison system, but it has ties to drug trafficking operations back in Mexico. They're known to deal in cocaine, heroin, marijuana, methamphetamine, and yes, they still have beef with the Norteños. In 2008 and 2009, members of the Sureños were arrested for murdering Norteños members, and San Francisco's Mission District is notorious for gang wars between the two. At least they're sticking to tradition. In 2014, the U.S. Immigration Service launched Project Southbound, which saw 638 members of Sureños arrested. During these arrests, 54 firearms, 13.36 pounds of methamphetamine, 82.76 pounds of marijuana, 3.075 pounds of cocaine, 1.44 pounds of heroin, and more than $166,000 were confiscated. Despite the bust, the gang continues its operations to this day. MS-13.
Yeah, MS-13 I've heard about, man. They seem crazy, man.
What is especially wild about the Mara Salvatrucha gang,
They're from like El Salvador or something like that, right?
otherwise known as the MS-13, is the fact that it actually started for a wholesome cause. The gang started in California in the 1980s, after there was a rise in Salvadorian immigrants to the area because of the civil war in their home country. Because many of them were poor and undocumented, they were preyed on by other gangs that already existed. Initially, it was a group of young metalheads who banded together to protect this vulnerable population. This all changed after Ernesto Deras, a former member of the Salvadoran Special Forces, became its leader in the 90s.
Stanna. Jag vet att du ser mig.
Yeah.
Things turned violent and very deadly. Special Forces became its leader in the 90s. This is when things turned violent and very deadly. He used military training to turn the gang into what it is today and led the recruitment of new members. The thing is that these new members were the young, poor, undocumented Salvadorian boys arriving unaccompanied in the US. Yep, the M13 was now preying on the same people it was set up to protect, and the fact that it recruits young boys only makes its initiation process seem more cruel. According to the BBC, the boys have to endure a brutal 13-second beating and have to carry out a crime to join the gang, and once they do,
I mean, that part about taking a beating, I mean, that seems like it's kind of common in gangs in general at the moment.
endure a brutal 13-second beating and have to carry out a crime to join the gang, and once they do join, they can't leave, alive that is. Members of the gang who break protocol or try to leave are murdered. The gang's motto is reportedly kill, rape, and control, and sadly, they have lived up to this
How the hell are you gonna have rape in your motto, man? That's just insane, man.
The gang's motto is reportedly kill, rape, and control, and sadly, they have lived up to this reputation. It is estimated that there are between 6,000 and 10,000 members in the United States and over 50,000 back in Central America. The gang has been involved in drug and human trafficking, extortion, and yes, murder. In 2016, a member of the gang, Enrique Portillo, joined several others who attacked high school girls Nisa Mickens, 15, and Kayla Cuevas, 16, with machetes and baseball bats.
Federal authorities and police in Long Island arrested.
That's just some BS, man.
With machetes and baseball bats.
Federal authorities and police in Long Island arrested 4 MS-13 gang members for the murders of 3 teenagers.
Rest in peace, man.
The gangbangers will be charged with the murders of 2 high school girls who were murdered in Brentwood, Long Island in September.
Their bodies were found in the following days, and reports say that it was over a dispute at their high school. This case showed just how far the gang would go, and that even teenagers are not spared. Crips and Bloods.
Yeah, in Crips and Bloods, of course, there's still a lot of them around, I guess, but it doesn't feel like you hear about them in the same way anymore. But yeah.
Adding to my list.
And gang politics over there is crazy as well.
List of dangerous gangs and gangs based in the California area are the Crips and the Bloods. Now, if you're familiar with pop culture and hip-hop history, you know who they are and probably know their red and blue colors and what they represent. But if you aren't, let me explain. The Bloods and the Crips are both Los Angeles-based gangs that are involved in drug dealings, murder, extortion, robbery. You know, the usual. What makes them unique is that they've had pretty legendary beef with each other for years at this point. Let's start with the Crips. They were formed in 1969 by Stanley Tookie Williams and Raymond Lee. Washington, who were already controlling gangs in East and West LA at barely 18. The idea was simple: band together and corner the market for drugs and other illegal activities. This worked, and the gang saw its membership and pockets grow over the decades, especially during the crack epidemic in the 80s and 90s. There was some infighting and turmoil after Williams went to jail and Washington died, but the gang remains strong to this day and had over 30,000 members as of 2015. The Crips have also boasted famous members like Snoop Dogg, Eazy-E, and Coolio. But what about the Bloods? Well, they were formed in the 1970s after the Crips attacked 2 high school students, Sylvester Scott and Benson Owens. In 1972, the Crips also murdered a man named Robert Ballou after a concert because he wouldn't give up his jacket. Many of those who felt victimized by the group met up and decided to form a group in retaliation. Some famous Bloods members today include Lil Wayne, Gucci Mane, and YG. And while they were outnumbered by the Crips, the Bloods have more than made up for it with violence. Both groups have been known to murder one another, steal cars, and operate to this day. In 2022, for example, police arrested gangsters associated with both the Bloods and Crips for a shooting in Sacramento that saw 100 bullets shot and 6 people dead.
Damn, that's insane, man.
The two have been at it for years and show no signs of stopping.
But as well, today I've heard like it's some Bloods are cool with some Crips and some Bloods beef each other and Crips beef each other, so yeah, that seems complicated, man.
The Yakuza.
Oh damn, the Yakuza, yeah, they're on a different type of thing.
The Yakuza have the reputation of being one of the oldest and perhaps the most misunderstood gangs in the world. The group was first formed in the 17th century and was mostly composed of Takiya, who were considered lower-ranked Japanese citizens. The Yakuza actually started out as a way to protect the stalls belonging to members of the caste. Even today, much of the Yakuza is made up of men from lower-income backgrounds. The Yakuza are also known to value honor and loyalty above all else. There are strict hierarchies of power within the gang, and this is shown through the sharing of sake called sakazuki. They also have some pretty out there practices like full body tattoos for many of their members and cutting off the top of their fingers as a way to apologize, while the group
Oh damn.
tattoos for many of their members and cutting off the top of their fingers as a way to apologize. While the group saw the peak of its membership in the 1960s with almost 200,000
200,000. Damn.
members, only around 20,000 remain today, but that doesn't mean that they are any less deadly. Among the Yakuza's illegal activities are drug trafficking, extortion, loan sharking, prostitution, and much more. They also have syndicates in the United States and ties with Korean and Chinese gangs, and let's just say that they smuggle a lot of guns. In fact, a majority of the guns confiscated in Japan were manufactured in the United States, and the FBI has been investigating the gang's money laundering. Then, there is the gang's connection to drugs. Much of the illegal drugs that are imported into Japan are believed to come from the Yakuza, which makes sense given the group's not-so-legitimate beginnings. One Yakuza boss said, speaking to a journalist, "One sure way of making money is drugs. That's the one thing you can't get hold of without an underworld connection." They're also known to traffic women from all over the world, threaten local business owners, and use many legal businesses as a front for their operations. And despite a few shows of goodwill, like helping out after the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, there have been some government efforts to crack down on the gang, and while it is nowhere as powerful as it was during its heyday, the Yakuza remain a very real and very deadly organization with ties to others all over the world. Sinaloa Cartel.
Yeah, this one's crazy, obviously.
To understand just how deep the Sinaloa Cartel's legacy is,
Pinnvin, italienska viner.
Consider the fact that it is basically descended from another powerful cartel from the 20th century and used to be headed by El Chapo. Yes, that El Chapo. When Chapo was a young boy, he did what other boys did and worked at his uncle's business. His uncle just happened to be Pedro Aviles Perez, and the business was drug trafficking. After his uncle was killed in a shootout with police, the Guadalajara cartel became the top dog of drugs in Mexico. To avoid being brought down by the police in one fell swoop, the cartel devolved into smaller factions, including what we now know as the Sinaloa cartel. After years of warring with other cartels, the Sinaloa cartel became very powerful and very ruthless. It currently has over 100,000
100,000, man. That's nuts.
members, and some say it is even bigger than what Pablo Escobar's empire was at its peak. They
Oh, damn. They say it's bigger. Shit, man.
also have a reputation for carrying out gruesome and graphic murders. People killed by the cartel are often beheaded or dissolved in acid. What's worse, these videos are usually shared online. If you've heard of those graphic cartel beheading videos floating on the web, they're probably the work of the Sinaloa cartel, and law enforcement has tried to crack down on the cartel. In 2009, Mexican police arrested 750 cartel members and
Damn, that's a lot, man.
seized boats, cars, and $59 million in cash. But their big
59 mil.
cartel members and seized boats, cars, and $59 million in cash. But their biggest win came in 2014 when they arrested its long-standing leader, El Chapo. But he escaped from prison twice before being caught and extradited to the United States. At the peak of his power, El Chapo presided over the biggest drug operation in the world, and when he was sentenced to life in prison, he was ordered to forfeit $12.6 billion. But that wasn't the end of the Sinaloa.
$12.6 billion. Holy shit, man.
He was ordered to forfeit $12.6 billion, but that wasn't the end of the Sinaloa cartel. The cartel is now being run by Ismael El Mayo Zambada and deals in
Oh, yeah, I've heard El Mayo before, I think.
cocaine, marijuana, methamphetamine, and opioids. And despite decades of law enforcement trying to stop the cartel, it's still going strong. 18th Street
18th. I don't know if I've heard about this one.
gang. Now, I've talked about the MS-13 gang and how deadly they are, but did you know that they have a rival gang? Yep, the MS-13 are the direct rivals of the 18th Street gang.
Oh. I guess they're as crazy as MS-13 then.
Also known as the Barrio 18. Unlike the MS-13,
Oh, wow.
which is mainly made up of
I
Salvadorian
think I've heard Barrio 18 though.
people, the 18th Street Gang is multi-ethnic and has close ties to the Mexican mafia. As you might have noticed from the entries on the list, being affiliated with a mafia is always a sign of nefarious activity, and the 18th Street Gang has a lot of this. Its rivalry with MS-13 has been so deadly that a judge said, these two gangs have turned the Central American Northern Triangle into the area with the highest homicide rate in the world. But how did the 18th Street Gang start, and how did they become big enough to rival MS-13? It all dates back to the 1960s in California, when a gang called the Clanton 14 was very powerful. The thing is that this gang didn't allow non-Mexicans to join. Feeling left out, a group of non-Mexican, immigrant, and mixed-race youth formed their own gang. The gang was comprised of several neighborhoods in California, like Eastside 18th Street, Northside 18th Street, and Westside 18th Street, but it's since expanded with tens of thousands of members. For starters, it has links outside of California, and when members were deported to Central America, they set up base there. In fact, that's where the rivalry with MS-13 started. Both wanted control of the Central American turf, and boy, has this feud been bloody. In the US, they are known to be one of the most violent gangs, involved in carjacking, drug trade, murder, shootings, and much more. In fact, every day in California, at least one person is robbed by an 18th Street gang member. The gang
At least one person a day.
has left a trail of murders in both the US, including the murder of football player Wilson Palacios' teenage brother, and in Central
R.I.P. man.
America, where they routinely kill civilians and other gang members. The turf war with the MS-13 and its violent reputation doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. Camorra.
Yeah, that's the Italian mob, right?
When you think of gangs, one of the first things that comes to mind is the Italian mob. And not to worry, they're well represented on this list by the Camorra, one of the oldest gangs in the world. The Camorra has been operating since the 17th century, but it was in the 19th century that things really got exciting. The gang was involved in blackmail, extortion, smuggling, and robberies. It also acted as a way to protect illegal gambling, as its name is a combination of the words capo meaning boss and mora meaning gambling. But they weren't entirely operating in the shadows. Many members of the Camorra were accepted into the police force, and some successfully ran for office. Now, what's interesting about the Camorra is that they're not really a unified gang. There are several different factions, and each has its own leader and activities. In the late 20th century, it was estimated that there were dozens of Camorra clans. This is mostly good for the organization because it can't be easily taken down. Like clan leader Pasquale Galasso once said, Campania can get worse because you could cut into a Camorra group, but another 10 could emerge from it. But when you have so many factions with so many leaders, there's bound to be infighting. In 2005,
Yeah, that's what I thought as well, man. Somebody's gonna wanna be the big boss.
the Di Loro and Scissionisti di Secondigliano clans had a bloody war called the Scampia Feud. It saw hundreds dead, and at one point, the Italian police sent over 1,000 officers into Naples to stop the killing, but it didn't work. The gang remains
Is this actually what the show is about? The Camorra, like, Netflix show?
Police sent over 1,000 officers into Naples to stop the killing, but it didn't work. The gang remains powerful to this day, and while many of the older members are dead and in jail, their younger and flashier children are taking their place. This means flexing stolen money and designer clothes on social media, as well as the clan rivalries and shootouts. The Russian mafia.
The Russians are mad as well.
No list of the most dangerous gangs in the world would be complete without a nod to the Russian mafia. They've dominated our screens for years, but just how powerful are they in real life? A lot. Now, organized
Öluff i Thailand.
Damn, that's a long ass commercial, man. Annoying. Double as well. What the hell, man? Yeah.
crime in Russia has existed since the 17th century, but things really took off in the 20th century after the fall of the Soviet Union. Ex-KGB agents became powerful mafia leaders, and Russian business people had to pay them for protection or end up in a pretty tricky spot. But the Russian mob operates well outside of Russia itself. In the United States alone, there are 30 known syndicates, and these do everything from drug smuggling to human trafficking to extortion. There are hundreds, if not thousands, still operating in Russia to this day, but they aren't quite as structured as their US counterparts. But what's really fascinating about the Russian mafia is how long they have endured. Countless mob bosses have been sent to jail or killed, but someone else always seems to take their place.
I mean, that's every gang, though.
Police in Russia say one of the main figures in the country's organized crime community has been gunned down in Moscow. Aslan Usoyan controlled a criminal group which trafficked drugs and weapons and ran clandestine businesses. The 75-year-old was killed by a single shot.
And to be clear, these mob bosses aren't just shady underworld figures. They're actually pretty well connected. Besides its ties to other gangs like the Camorra, top mafia figures like Semyon Mogilevich have been said to be pretty tight with the likes of Vladimir Putin.
Of course.
Alexander Torshin, who's a top Russian politician, has also been rumored to be a mafia boss. And just how rich is the Russian mafia? Well, consider the fact that in 2018, 18 mafia associates were accused of laundering $62 million of the gang's ill-gotten funds through none other than Rosgosstrak, the largest insurance company in Russia. When a gang is as old as the Russian mafia and operates in over 50 countries, you're bound to have some loose change lying about. Los Zetas.
Los Zetas. Is that cartel as well?
Los Zetas dates back to the 1990s in Mexico and is sort of an offshoot of another gang, the Gulf Cartel. After Osiel Cardenas
Okay, so kind of.
Guillen became the leader of the Gulf Cartel, he started meeting with ex-members of the Mexican army to avoid being targeted by the army and rival gangs. Thus, Los Zetas was formed and helped the cartel with kidnapping, extortion, and securing its trade routes for human and drug trafficking. But by 2010, Los Zetas broke away and became its own gang and even rivaled the Gulf Cartel. Keep in mind, Los Zetas was one of the newer gangs on the scene, and it had to make a name for itself. Rather than teaming up with other gangs, it decided to outdo them in violence and terror. When Los Zetas decided to kill someone, it was brutal. The victims were tortured, beheaded, cooked in ovens, and had their bodies strung up for
Cooked in ovens. That's mad.
someone. It was brutal. The victims were tortured, beheaded, cooked in ovens, and had their bodies strung up for onlookers to see. This meant that many of the families of victims could not claim their bodies. As one victim's mother said to the Irish Times, "I have no doubt that those bones are from human beings. Maybe they're from my son or the children of my comrades, and we'll never find them." Because Los Zetas was so brutal in its methods, other gangs decided to up their antics and become even more brutal. The result? Over 60,000 people have gone missing in Mexico because of the gang wars.
60,000. in how many years though, but either way, that's crazy, man.
But things still aren't letting up. While many of the founding members of Los Zetas have been arrested or killed, the gang's activities have continued, and its influence can be seen especially in Los Angeles and Guatemalan prisons. Throughout the 2010s, there have been several massacres by Los Zetas, and the death toll is in the hundreds. Hells Angels.
Oh, Hells Angels. You don't hear about them a lot anymore though.
We all love the idea of a biker gang, but what about Hells Angels, the OG Harley-Davidson riding biker gang? Well, for starters, they're considered a criminal enterprise by the United States Department of Justice and Europol. But why? Hells Angels first came to be in 1948 after several smaller biker gangs banded together. As of 2023, Hells Angels has over 6,000 members in 59 countries around the world, though they were forced to close down in the Netherlands. A bar that the Hells Angels frequented had been burned down, and they kept getting into fights with rival gangs. According to a court in the Netherlands, the Hells Angels is a danger to the public order. This is far from the only controversy the Angels have found themselves in. Back in 1969, rock legend Mick Jagger dragged the Angels after one of their members stabbed someone to death following the Altamont Speedway Free Festival. The stabbing was ruled as self-defense, but there was a plot to kill Jagger for a while. Hells Angels have also been linked to some unsavory activities like extortion, prostitution, drug trafficking, and organized crime. Along with the other big three biker gangs, the Pagans, the Outlaws, and the Bandidos, Hells Angels are looked at with suspicion by law enforcement. But at the same time, the Angels insist that they're just a wholesome group of guys who like to ride bikes, at least if they're white. While the Angels don't explicitly ban non-white people from joining, they rarely have any members of color. Founding member Sonny Barger has said in an interview, "If you're a motorcycle rider and you're white, you want to join the Hells Angels. If you're black, you want to join the Dragons. That's how it is whether anyone likes it or not. We don't have no blacks, and they don't have no whites." Aryan Brotherhood.
Oh damn, these guys are nuts. But I would guess that they're mostly like a prison gang, if I'm not mistaken.
Where do we even begin with the Aryan Brotherhood? First, they are literally neo-Nazis, so there's that. On top of this, they are a prison gang, so you know their MO is violence. To give you a hint, they are a very low percentage of the US prison population, but commit a huge percentage of its murders. The Aryan Brotherhood was founded in 1964, after prisons in the United States were integrated. The gang organized and attacked black inmates, and initially had members of the Manson family in their midst, but kicked them out because they killed pregnant Sharon Tate. At least they have some limits. To join the Aryan Brotherhood, you have to be a white prisoner.
Damn commercials, man. This is long. Yeah, you always see Aryan Brotherhood, it feels like, when it comes to prisons, man.
Not all. They have some limits. To join the Aryan Brotherhood, you have to be a white prisoner, obviously, but that's not all. The Brotherhood has a blood-in, blood-out system. To get in, you have to injure or kill a member of law enforcement or a person of color.
Oh, damn.
To get out, you don't. Even after members are released from prison, they have to do their leader's bidding.
I think I heard that from some... Is it in like South Africa? They have this like numbers gang or whatever it's called. I think they had like the same thing.
From the outside, the Brotherhood is involved in smuggling drugs in and out of prisons, murder, theft, and much more. Members on the outside commit these crimes and give a portion of profits to those on the inside. The Aryan Brotherhood has over 20,000 members in the prison system, and many of its head honchos are serving life in prison without parole. This has made it a bit tricky to punish them. Some prosecutors have tried to get the death penalty for these leaders, but the group remains active to this day. It's also had affiliations with others on the list like Hells Angels, and even John Gotti at one point. Aryan Brotherhood members have staged prison riots, killed guards, attacked and killed many people of color, and are usually recognized with their distinct
That's a mad tattoo, man.
tattoos. Commando Vermelho.
I don't think I've heard this. It sounds like Brazilian or something.
Commando Vermelho, or the Red Command as it's sometimes called, is a very violent, organized crime syndicate operating in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
Right, at least.
It was first formed in the 1970s. After Brazil's dictatorship, government began housing leftist guerrillas and petty criminals in the same jails. The two groups banded together to protect themselves and shared ideas. As the dictatorship was coming to an end, prisoners were released and immediately joined the growing cocaine trade. They trafficked drugs for the Colombian cartels and soon cornered the market in Rio de Janeiro. Amazingly, they partnered with the favela communities that they operated in and offered social services to residents as long as they could carry on with their activities. But the drug profits riots swelled. There was infighting, breakaway groups, drug wars, and the whole lot. Now, the Comando Vermelho are estimated to have around 20,000 members, though many are in prison. The group operates through the slums of Rio de Janeiro and gets a steady supply of recruits from the impoverished young men with few options. Some of the gang's activities include theft, drug trafficking, kidnapping, extortion, and murder. It has a pretty loose power structure, and while some bosses in prisons collect funds from those on the outside, many members are able to operate as they like. But this doesn't mean that all is well in the world of drugs and crime. The Comando Vermelho has been at war with many other gangs for the best trafficking routes, and these wars get very bloody. Then there are the constant clashes with Brazilian police who have been trying to crush the cartels for decades to no avail. The gang has attacked an army base and even shot down a police helicopter.
Attacked an army base. You gotta be crazy to do that, man.
Cartels for decades to no avail. The gang has attacked an army base and even shot down a police helicopter at one point, all in its never-ending reign of terror. CJNG.
I don't know about this one.
CJNG is also known as the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or
Oh, so it's a Mexican cartel as well.
Los Matas Zetas, and is basically an offshoot of another gang on this list, the Sinaloa Cartel. It all started with the death of Ignacio Coronel Villarreal, who was the leader of the Sinaloa Cartel. After he died, one of the gangs that was loyal to them, the Milenio Cartel, broke off and eventually devolved into smaller factions that fought over dominance in the Jalisco region. One of these factions is what we now know as CJNG. It's headed by El Mencho, who is one of the most wanted drug dealers in the world. The group first began its activities in
I haven't even heard about these.
2009, when the bodies of 3 men were found in a truck with a message saying, "We are the new group Mata Zetas, Zeta Killers, and we are against kidnapping and extortion, and we will fight them in all states for a cleaner Mexico." But don't get too excited. The CJNG immediately started its violent activities, going to war with the other gangs in Mexico and leaving several massacres in its wake. As of 2023, they have a reported 20,000 members and have earned the title of the second most deadly gang in Mexico, second only to the Sinaloa Cartel. And what have they done to earn this reputation? Well, it moves billions of dollars in illegal drugs every year and maintains its grip on the areas it operates in through violence. It has killed hundreds of people and in some cases even engaged in cannibalism. Many of their
Cannibalism. What the hell?
through violence. It has killed hundreds of people and in some cases even engaged in cannibalism. Many of their horrific acts have been filmed and uploaded online, and the group is known to have an ongoing hitman program. While there are rumors of El Mencho being in poor health and infighting within the group, the drugs, killing, and other crimes don't seem to be stopping anytime soon. Black Disciples. The Black Disciples is a Chicago-based drug trafficking gang made up mostly of young African-American men. It came together in the 1950s and 1960s after a group of young men started their own gang, Devil's Disciples. Then they merged with another gang called the Gangster Disciples. But after their founder Larry Hoover was sent to jail, the Devil's Disciples leader David Barksdale took over. But after he died, the group once again was split into 2 factions, the Black Gangsters Disciples and the Black Disciples. The 2 groups spent years at war with each other, with head honchos and regular members being assassinated on the streets of Chicago, and while the fighting eventually stopped, the drugs and criminal activity did not. Perhaps the gang's most infamous incident was in 1994, when it recruited a young boy called Robert Yummy Sandifer. By the way, Yummy was just 11 years old when the gang recruited him and gave him a pistol, ordering him to go out and kill. Naturally, being a literal child, he missed when he was shooting and ended up killing a 14-year-old girl nearby. The gang was
R.I.P. man.
immediately the subject of media scrutiny. Its leadership found itself in a bind and decided to fix the problem by killing the 11-year-old boy that they had armed in the first place. 2 members, Derek and Craig Hardaway, were tasked with luring little Yummy to a secluded area and shooting him in the head. Naturally, this backfired and they were convicted of the murder. To this day, the gang has thousands of members, including the likes of rappers Lil Durk and Chief Keef, and continues to operate in the Chicago area. It mostly operates a decentralized leadership system, though its current head is a man called King Shorty and has as many as 300 sets still active.
Those men are members of the Gangster Disciples, responsible for 12 murders and a dozen other shootings that weren't fatal.
There are countless gangs in the world, but the ones on this list are perhaps the worst. They've committed endless crimes, ended many lives, and have created a legacy as some of the worst groups.
What are these thumbnails, man? But yeah, this was a good video. Most of the gangs I've heard about before, obviously. And yeah, obviously most of them are mad. But yeah, like I said before, let me know if you want me to check out more stuff like this. And let me know what you want to see in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And I'm out. Peace.